comes a moment in every human life, quiet, almost unnoticeable, when the chase begins to falter. You stop running, not because you found what you seek, but because the pursuit itself begins to feel hollow, like a candle chasing its own light. For years you may have chased success, validation, love, as if meaning were something waiting at the horizon. But no matter how fast you move, the horizon moves too. You achieve one goal and another takes its place. You please one person and 10 more appear with silent expectations. And somewhere in the noise of ambition, a whisper begins to rise within you, a quiet dissonance that says, "This is not peace." Carl Jung once wrote that what we resist persists, and perhaps that is a secret most of us avoid, that every chase is, at its core, a form of resistance. Resistance to the parts of ourselves we cannot bear to sit with. We chase to forget. We strive to drown out silence. We run from the shadows that follow too closely behind. The modern soul is fast. It worships motion. It calls stillness laziness and silence failure. But if you listen closely, beneath the endless movement lies something sacred. A tremor, a presence, a truth too long buried. What if the very thing you are chasing is hiding in the place you refuse to look? What if the peace you seek has been waiting in the shadow of your own rejection? Jung called it the shadow, the collection of everything we deny, repress, or abandon in ourselves. Not evil, but exile. Not darkness, but disowned light. We spend our lives curating masks, images of strength, confidence, perfection. But behind each image is a silent self, watching us from the edges, asking only to be seen. You can chase your dreams for a lifetime, but until you turn and face that unseen self, everything you attract will be a reflection of what you still refuse to love. When you stop chasing, something mysterious begins to happen. The energy, once spent in pursuit, returns to you. The outer noise softens, and what was once an echo becomes a voice, your own, unfiltered, unafraid. This is not the end of ambition, it's the beginning of alignment. The moment when the seeker becomes still enough to realize the treasure was never ahead. It was always within. And that stillness, that quiet awareness, is the doorway to the self you've been chasing all along. To live in the modern world is to live in a performance. We are taught to smile, to stay positive, to keep moving forward no matter what burns behind us. We decorate our wounds with affirmations, convincing ourselves that ignoring pain is the same as healing it. But repression is not peace, it is pressure. And eventually, the soul begins to suffocate under the weight of its own denial. Think of how many times you've said, "I'm fine," even when your chest felt hollow, when your eyes blurred, not from tears but from exhaustion. We've become experts at pretending, not out of deceit but out of fear. Fear that if we stop pretending, everything might collapse. Carl Jung called this the psychic split. It is the moment we choose survival over truth. The moment we divide ourselves, one half to present to the world, the other buried beneath silence. You show the light and hide the dark. You display control but conceal longing. You offer kindness while swallowing resentment. And over time, that hidden self, the one you lock away, begins to rot in the dark. The irony is cruel. The more we run from our pain, the more power it gains over us. The more we suppress our anger, the louder it echoes in our thoughts. The more we hide our loneliness, the deeper it grows into the soil of our being. We begin to feel detached, like actors reading lines written by someone else. We chase success, but it feels hollow. We seek love, but we attract mirrors of our own wounds. Because the unconscious, that vast ocean of forgotten emotion, is always communicating, always guiding, always shaping what we attract. You can change your habits, your goals, your appearance. But if your inner world remains unexamined, you will repeat the same cycles under different names. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. How many of our accidents are really our shadows calling for attention? How many heartbreaks, failures, or betrayals are life's way of showing us what we refuse to see? We repress because repression feels safer than confrontation. We smile because silence is easier than honesty. We keep busy because stillness terrifies us. But every avoided emotion leaves a mark. Every denied truth grows roots. And eventually, Those roots rise through the surface, in the form of anxiety, addiction, restlessness, envy. You can hear it in the way people talk about happiness, as if it's a finish line, not a state of being, as if peace were something we earn by escaping pain, instead of embracing it. This is the paradox. The harder you chase happiness, the more it slips through your fingers, because the chase itself is a declaration of lack. And the unconscious listens. It does not respond to what you say you want. It responds to what you believe you are missing. So when you chase love, it means you believe you are unlovable. When you chase success, it means you believe you are not enough. When you chase peace, it means you have not made peace with yourself. That's why the chase never ends, because the runner and the running are the same. Both are born from avoidance, a refusal to look inward. And yet, there comes a breaking point, a moment when the masks begin to crack and the light starts bleeding through the fractures. That's when the real journey begins. Not towards something new, but back towards what was forgotten. It is in that collapse, that stillness, that the truth begins to whisper again. A whisper that says, you do not need to chase what is already within you. There is a moment, rare, unmistakable, when the chasing stops, not because you've given up, but because something deeper within you awakens. It's not a moment of defeat, it's a moment of recognition. You suddenly see that the thing you were running toward has been running beside you all along. That is the beginning of consciousness, the beginning of seeing yourself as you truly are, not as the image you project, not as the story you tell, but as the totality of light and darkness within. Carl Jung called this individuation, the sacred process of becoming whole. To Jung, the goal of life wasn't perfection, but completeness, not to erase the shadow, but to recognize it as part of your soul, because the shadow is not your enemy, it is your unacknowledged strength, your repressed creativity, your forgotten passion, your rejected truth. It is everything you were told not to be, everything you feared to express. When you deny your anger, you also deny your boundaries. When you bury your grief, you also bury your depth. When you hide your fear, you also hide your courage. The more you disown the darkness, the more you amputate the light. And so, to become whole, you must learn to hold both. Integration begins when you stop labeling parts of yourself as wrong. When you stop saying, this is not me, because the truth is, it is you. It always has been. Imagine standing before a mirror that reflects not your body, but your soul. You would see beauty and brilliance, yes, but also jealousy, rage, lust, despair. And if you could gaze upon that reflection without turning away, without judgment, you would finally see the totality of your being. That is what Jung meant by the shadow. It's not the darkness you fight, it's the part of you that longs to be understood. The world tells us to choose light over dark, good over bad, virtue over flaw. But nature does not divide herself this way. The forest grows from decay as much as from sunlight. The night sky holds both stars and emptiness. And the human soul, the most intricate mirror of all, is no different. To chase only light is to live half a life. To integrate the dark is to reclaim your full humanity. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig." Jung would have agreed, but he would add, dig even where it hurts. Because what you find there, in the mud, the shadow, the wound, is the seed of your transformation. You begin to see that the emotions you feared, anger, shame, envy, are not flaws, but signals. Each one is a messenger carrying a truth. Anger may tell you where you've been silenced. Shame may reveal where you've been disconnected from love. Envy may point toward the unlived life waiting within you. The shadow speaks in the language of tension, and every time you feel conflict between who you are and who you pretend to be, you are standing at the threshold of awakening. That's why people say that healing feels like breaking. Because the illusion must crack before the truth can breathe. When you face what you fear, you stop fighting with yourself, and when the inner battle ends, so does the chase. Wholeness doesn't mean erasing your pain. It means bowing to it, seeing it as part of the same sacred fabric as your joy. It means standing in the light without denying the night. To see your shadow clearly is to see your soul completely. It is the moment you realize you were never broken, you were never missing anything, you were simply divided. and now you are ready to return to yourself. The peace you've been chasing cannot be found by running outward. It arises the moment you stop and listen inward, because when you stop chasing, you start attracting, not because you gain something new, but because you finally radiate what you truly are. Awakening to the shadow is not the end of the journey. It's the beginning of a quieter, braver one. It's the moment you realize that enlightenment is not about floating above the world, but walking through it with your eyes open. Integration begins, not in theory, but in the smallest moments of honesty. When you admit, "I'm jealous," instead of pretending to be indifferent. When you say, "I'm hurt," instead of acting untouchable. When you let yourself feel without rushing to fix. This is how the unconscious becomes conscious. Not through grand revelation, but through quiet sincerity. Through the courage to witness what is, without shame, without denial. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." To integrate the shadow is not to conquer it, but to invite it into awareness. To look at the parts of you that frighten you, and say, "You belong here too." When you do this, something subtle shifts. The energy once locked in repression begins to flow again. Creativity returns. Authenticity returns. You start to speak more truthfully, love more honestly, and act more intentionally, because you are no longer driven by what you deny. You are guided by what you understand. In relationships, this transformation is profound. Instead of chasing people to fill your emptiness, you begin to attract those who resonate with your wholeness. Instead of seeking validation, you offer presence. Instead of fearing rejection, you respect boundaries, both theirs and your own. To integrate the shadow is to bring humility into love. You no longer demand perfection from others, because you have stopped pretending to be perfect yourself. You see their darkness as a mirror of your own humanity, and in that shared imperfection, connection becomes real. In leadership too, this awareness changes everything. True leaders do not project power, they embody presence. They know that unresolved ego creates chaos. They lead from balance, knowing when to act and when to yield. They understand that the greatest authority comes from authenticity, not control. And in solitude, the transformation deepens further. When you stop fearing your own company, the silence becomes sacred. The mind that once demanded constant stimulation begins to rest in the simplicity of being. You discover that solitude is not loneliness. It is intimacy with the self. In that stillness, attraction happens naturally. You attract peace because you have made peace within. You attract depth because you no longer fear your own. You attract authenticity because you live in truth. The world begins to respond differently, not because it has changed, but because you have. Your vibration, your choices, your presence, they all speak the quiet language of alignment. To live in alignment is to stop chasing what contradicts your soul. It is to move from desire to direction, from effort to flow, from control to trust. It doesn't mean life becomes perfect. You will still feel pain, disappointment, and loss. But now you meet them consciously, without collapsing into them, without denying them. Pain becomes a teacher. Failure becomes refinement. Silence becomes guidance. And through it all, you remain anchored, not in illusion, but in understanding. The shadow doesn't disappear. It walks beside you, no longer an enemy, but a companion. It whispers reminders of humility and keeps you tethered to the truth. When you stop chasing, you start listening. When you stop resisting, you start receiving. And when you stop running from the dark itself begins to illuminate your path. This is the quiet revolution Jung spoke of. Not an escape from the world, but a reconciliation with the whole of yourself. A transformation that turns every wound into wisdom and every silence into strength. There comes a morning, quiet, unremarkable, where you no longer feel the pull to prove, to chase, to grasp. The air feels lighter, not because the world has changed, but because you have stopped fighting it. You begin to see beauty in ordinary things, the stillness of a cup of tea, the soft weight of sunlight through a window, the rhythm of your own breath. Nothing has been added to your life, but everything feels full. This is the paradox of awakening. When you stop chasing what you think you lack, you discover the completeness that was never gone. Carl Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. not who you were taught to be, not who the world demands, but the being beneath all masks, the one who existed before the striving began. Holiness is not a destination, it is a return to the self you abandoned in the pursuit of being worthy, a return to the stillness that was always waiting beneath the noise. When you stop chasing, you no longer attract from emptiness. You attract from essence, from the quiet gravity of someone who no longer needs to convince the universe to love them, because you have become love itself. The shadow is no longer feared, it is integrated. It walks with you, not behind you, but beside you. It no longer whispers, "You are broken." It now says, "You are whole." You understand, finally, that peace was never the reward for perfection. It was the birthright of awareness. To be human is not to escape contradiction. It is to contain it with grace. Light and dark, strength and vulnerability, ambition and surrender. All threads in the same luminous fabric. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And perhaps Jung would answer, when you make peace with your inner world, the outer one begins to mirror it. So, let the world move. Let time carry its weight. Let things come and go. You have no need to chase anymore, because what is meant for you has already found its way to your stillness. In the quiet, after the storm, you finally understand. The universe was never testing your worth. It was waiting for you to stop running so it could meet you where you are. And in that silence, you realize you were never chasing life. Life was always chasing you.